All right, guys. Well, welcome to the Sports Guys. We're really glad you came this week. Have an exciting episode for you. A lot of you fans love the NBA, and it's been a long time coming. We're finally addressing the NBA this week. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about post All-Star break, a whole slew of topics, a lot of stories within the NBA, storylines we need to talk about and get into with you fans. But how are you doing this week, Rob?
Doing great. Just busy as ever.
Yeah, I bet. I like that logo behind you, NBA Finals. Really, that's what this home stretch is all about after the All-Star game. You got essentially 25 games left. A lot of big-time fans who've been watching the NBA their whole lives really say that this is real basketball now. They're really the first part of the season. There's load management. There's taking care of your stars. There's working on different lineups. There's trades that happen in and out. Guys get promoted from the G League, et cetera. And now you're all of a sudden in a situation where the stretch is here and teams are trying to position themselves for the run. So what are your thoughts about who are the teams you're kind of really watching at this point coming out of the All-Star break and heading into the home stretch here?
I think you're definitely getting to see the leaders emerging a little bit. Boston, Milwaukee, Minnesota is kind of surprising. They're doing great. Denver, pretty much the haves and the have-nots are starting to form, and I think starting to get more obvious what we're looking at most likely.
It's interesting. The Boston Celtics the last couple of years have been the number one team in the East and then flamed out. And they always had some fatal flaws in the playoffs, would lose to lesser teams. And I always wondered whether Tatum would ever get there. But this year's team just seems a little bit different. They have kind of a killer instinct. They're playing much better defense. They have scoring all over the floor. Everybody can score on the floor. They're averaging 128 points a game, which has not been the case the last couple of years for them. So not only do they have a really robust defense and good rebounding, but their scoring is great. So I clearly think they're not just the best team in the East. I think they're the best team in the NBA right now.
I think that's right.
With a couple weeks left in the season, things can happen. So what are your thoughts about that?
I absolutely agree. I think they would be very easy to derail should they go on some kind of a slide or a hot team comes up. But if you were to look at their point differential is one of the most important stats there is. And basketball is one of those games that really kind of relies on stats to be able to understand all the
Right.
nuances and dynamics of the game. And Boston has the most impressive points for and points against differential of any team. They're the most impressive team. I would say Milwaukee is probably second. Minnesota's is pretty incredible. So it really comes down to, if you look at the leaderboard, it parallels with the point differential. Because these teams aren't getting blown out when they lose. They're pretty much in close games and winning by a nice margin. And so that margin of victory is providing for them that cushion that's helping them get lots of wins. And it's showing up in the scoreboard. I mean, it's showing up it's really elevating them to the top. So,
no doubt.
That stat to me means a lot.
I would say that the Bucks are the close second best in the East. I think I would have said the 76ers at the beginning of the year. They've been slowly fading because Embiid keeps getting hurt and missing games. He's got all kinds of injury issues, has really the last couple of years, although he did win the MVP last year. But I think the 76ers are really fading. They're now down to seventh in the East. And he's going to be out for a substantial period of time, potentially all the way into the playoffs. So they may end up in ninth or 10th, just kind of holding on.
The problem with Embiid is that he is out until April 2nd, but it's going to be a lingering knee problem. So he might make it back for the playoffs, but he's going to be really battling it while
Mhm.
he's trying to elevate his game because everybody elevates in the playoffs, especially defensively. So it is going to be tough for him. The timing of this is not perfect.
Mhm. Well, we'll
So,
get into some more details of all these teams, both East and West, a little later in the program. But I have two thought-provoking questions for you. You know, we grew up during I think, the golden age of the NBA. I personally believe the game has been sliding for a while. I think
mhm.
if you ask my son's generation, the 20-year-olds, they think that this NBA is the best it's ever been. They love LeBron James. They think he's the greatest that's ever played. They love the 3 points and the dunks. And you know, I miss a day when we had Michael Jordan and Larry Bird and Magic Johnson and Hakeem Olajuwon and Tim Duncan and those types of players who actually played the game of basketball, would run plays,
Yeah.
had all kinds of variations off those same types of plays, would call those plays as they came up the court. It was just a much more interesting brand of basketball. Now it's just all
Mhm.
ISO and jacking up threes. So my first question to you is, do you think that NBA can be salvaged? Can the NBA game be salvaged, or is this just the
Yeah.
game we're going to expect from here on out? And is this the game maybe the global fans like?
So I saw an interesting interview with Kevin Garnett and Adam Silver, the commissioner, and they were talking about, having 200-point scoring all-star games and
Mhm.
um, two really, really high scoring games. And Adam Silver is very, very aware that, Kevin Garnett said, is there any way we could bring back the 80s and the
Mhm.
90s, the very physical games. And Adam Silver was very thoughtful. He was very aware that we're sliding towards too much scoring, not enough physicality. He
Right.
said, however, he said what was happening in the 80s and then into the 90s was he thinks basketball was actually too physical. And what was happening was it was hurting the brand. Not only was it causing a lot of injuries,
Yeah.
but what was happening was the high level skilled player wasn't able to showcase what he was able to do because
Mhm.
the bigger, stronger guy who was tough was going to throw him into the third
Mhm.
row. And so you couldn't showcase the talent that was special. And
Right.
so he said, we've done a lot of stuff towards skewing uh, towards allowing the spacing and the hand checking is a foul, so that the special skills of the players will come out as the product. And so what is being discussed now is a rule change that Adam Silver seemed like he was open to, which is getting rid of the 3-second violation
Mhm.
in the lane. So what happened was he said they instituted it originally because everyone was just packing in too much. And it was actually invented before the 3-point shot existed.
Right.
So he said, however, now with the floor spacing the way it is with all the 3-point shooters, I mean, even centers are 3-point shooters. You
Mhm.
don't have a spacing problem anymore down low. And so if you were to get rid of the 3-second rule, you would strongly encourage more post play, which
Mhm.
I think would automatically bring more physicality in, and
Mhm.
you would still have that high skill level guy out there who can shoot, step back threes, crossover, you'd still see the shake and bake stuff, but you would add a little more physicality back in. I think it was actually a brilliant observation by Silver. And I think he's right. I think you had to look at how do we eliminate a little bit of physicality, but they've done too much of that. So now it's too soft.
Right.
But if you
I
go
was
all the way
thinking
back,
I was thinking about this exact topic you're talking about. You make up some good points, and the first one is, would the Detroit Pistons of the '80s win a title today? The answer is no,
no, they'd be in last
because
place.
bottom line is they had Bill Laimbeer and they had Dennis Rodman and all these guys
Rick
that
Mahorn.
they'd practically tackle you. I mean, the
Yeah.
way they were stopping Jordan at that time was they would just tackle him and just throw
Yeah,
him into the bleachers.
they said that Jordan was not allowed to leave the floor. So whatever you had to do to hold him on the floor was what they were willing to do. Grab him, hold him, pull him down, push him, throw him in the stands. That was too physical,
Yeah,
and
I agree with that
you
because we're not
you
talking
could
about football. We're talking about basketball. I
yeah,
agree
you
with you.
you couldn't let Jordan shine when he played against teams like that. He found a way to do it, but you had to be the greatest player of all time to really showcase how much you can do. So anyway, the point is, I do think it can be saved. I think Adam Silver's got a good idea on trying to promote a little more interior and post play. I'm not a huge fan of just three after three after three because analytics say to take it. To me, it's more unwatchable. I like games that are under 100 points.
Well,
I like
what
defenses
I'm
that are
talking
that are
about,
playing hurt.
I agree with you and Adam Silver. But I also, what I'm talking about is just the coaching needs to get better too. I mean, you had Phil Jackson win all those titles with the Bulls and the Lakers. It helped that he had Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, of course, but he also had an offense called the Triangle and Two, and he used to
Mm.
run it to perfection, and he coached it to perfection. Every practice they ran it, and there was about 10 different variations off of it. But
Yeah,
I don't see that today. I don't see that in today's NBA, where the coaching is so much more superior back then than it was today. Today, they just go out there, shoot your threes, screen play off of a screen. That's it. ISO, ISO.
I think
And
because of NBA player empowerment is so powerful now, you just have to be more of a ego massager and babysitter.
mhm.
Like a
Yeah.
lot less of an X's O coach and a lot more of how do we get LeBron isolated one on one with a defender?
Hmm.
And then LeBron, you do your thing. And it is less coaching, but it's a lot more psychiatrist and
Hmm.
dealing with egos. I mean, believe me,
And
Jordan's teams had plenty of egos, but it was a lot more. The coach was in charge back then more than it is than the person is today.
let me just put the debate to rest. I know I'm from his era, but if you look at my background, Jordan was the best ever, still is the best ever. And the reason being is because of
Mhm.
his killer instinct. He was 6-0 in the finals. Um, Early in his career, he scored 63 against Larry Bird's Celtics. And after the game, Larry Bird said, "I think I just saw Jesus Christ in sneakers." So, he was just the most incredible player we've ever seen. You never would have thought that if you saw him in college. He was a decent player in college, but he is one of those few players that actually peaked in the pros.
He was a very
And
good athletic player in college, but what was so amazing about Jordan was that his game evolved while he was in the NBA. He went from super high flying athletic to somebody that developed all the skills,
right.
shooting, every kind of move in the air. He moved away from dunking it all the time to acrobatic plays that were just miraculous. He was money with the last second shot. He got the most out of his guys. He would dish it. There was a famous
Who
example in the playoffs where he's dishing it to Kerr and Kerr hits the last second shot to win. He knew Kerr was going to hit it. He got his team elevated around him to where it wasn't the best team I've ever seen, but it was the best team once Jordan got everyone putting
Mhm.
in everything they had.
That's true.
Um,
Although
and if you remove Jordan from it, that those teams weren't very good.
I will say
You
he
know?
would not have won his titles, in my opinion, without Scottie Pippen. I just think
Correct.
that Scottie was that great 1B player that he needed. I will
That's
say
right.
that, Jordan, like I said, number one, in terms of 2 through 5, I put LeBron in the top 5. I mean, there's no question, not just his longevity, but he has been dominant at times.
Hmm.
Uh, I would put Kobe number 2. I think he had that same killer instinct, and he was completely dominant for about 10 years there, just completely unstoppable at times. Um,
Yeah.
and 3, 4, 5 would probably be, Magic, LeBron, Larry Bird. That'd be my
I
top 5.
I think it goes Jordan, Kareem, Kobe, Magic, Bird.
And LeBron outside the top 5.
And LeBron would be about 6. Yeah.
I would have Kareem around 6. Obviously, the best center ever potentially. Maybe Akeem Olajuwon. There's a couple of others, but Tim Duncan
Yeah.
would make his case. But yeah, that's what I'd say on that player. But anyway, let's go ahead and go to an article that we're going to pop up on the screen here, and we're going to talk about kind of the 10 biggest question marks coming out of the All-Star break for the stretch run, and we're really going to take a look here at what we see. All right, so can you see the screen, Rob?
Yes.
All right, so first question right out of the gate is Joel Embiid, which we mentioned earlier. If he doesn't return for the rest of the regular season, are they going to be in the play-in tournament, the 76ers? And what position are they going to come in? I mean, they're sitting in 7 right now. This is a team that was projected to be one of the top 3 seeds in the East. What's your thought?
I think they'll get to a play-in game maybe, but they are going to slip.
I agree with that. And I guess the question is this a chronic thing with Embiid? Do they have to be worried for the long term? Because a couple of years in a row now, you know, plays really, really well at the beginning of the season and is looking like an MVP candidate. And then the last third, he always breaks down. You know, can the Sixers really contend if their best player, and maybe the best player in the NBA, is always breaking down at the end of the year?
I'm always nervous about big men with knee problems.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me nervous, but it's hard to say, you know. They're probably going to move a little more heavily into load management next year and all those things. But
Mm-hmm.
as far as this year, I do think the injury is going to be relevant the rest of the way for him and for them. So I think that hurts them.
Mm-hmm.
They have a
Absolutely.
pretty banged up squad. He's not the only one hurt. So
No, that's
I think,
exactly right.
yeah. So I think they're in trouble because their injuries are just nagging problem. Good players that are playing hurt and nobody's, out for a season, but it's just nagging stuff that is going to affect their performance.
So second question is, which team will hold the best record in the West? I'm sorry. Let's take a quick look at the standings right now. And I'm going to pull down here to the Western Conference. You can see Minnesota sitting in first, Oklahoma sitting in second. Really remarkable. These are two, basement dwellers for the last 20 years, both of whom had been drafting first-round picks for about 7 or 8 straight drafts. And clearly it's worked out because now they have all this young talent. They're sitting in first and second. Denver's
The key for Minnesota is they have the best defense in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
So they have breathing room on the fact that they're, let's see, a little below average in scoring, but they're the best on defense. So they can really keep other teams down and out of sync. So that bodes well that they're already playing good defense going towards the playoffs.
And you have Karl Anthony Towns on that team, who's one of the biggest up-and-coming players in the league.
Yeah.
OKC has one of the biggest up-and-coming players in the league. You have Denver is the defending champs. They're only 1 game back. So I would never count them out for that first, and they won it. And then LA Clippers had a really bad first half of the year, and they went on a tear. I think they went 11-2 in one juncture. It looks like the last 10 they're 5-5, but LA Clippers also can't really be counted out. So which of these teams predicting the 20 games out are you picking in the West?
Probably the Clippers. But I also feel pretty good about the way Minnesota's playing. And then Denver. So I think those are your 3 that are going to fight it out, and somebody's going to just get a little bit more wins than the other. But I think the Clippers, Denver, and Minnesota are going to be really fighting. You can't count out Jokic. I don't know if he has enough help.
I like Denver. I think Denver's going to figure out a way to win this West by a game and come in as the number 1 seed. And I like them again to go to the finals and play the Celtics. But maybe I'm wrong. Clippers certainly are a hot team. They're somebody that could make it. Number 3 is, can the Bucks recalibrate under Doc Rivers? Very strange situation midway through the season. They're sitting in second place in the East, playing really well. Giannis playing well, and they fire their coach. It was completely out of left field. Nobody saw it coming. Must have been an internal thing, maybe. Nobody
Sure.
really knew exactly what happened there, but it was a really strange situation, and ended up bringing in Doc Rivers to salvage the rest of the season, even though they really were in pretty good position. So, what are your thoughts? Can the Bucks make a run here? I know Giannis has been hobbled a little bit lately with an Achilles.
Yeah, him and Chris Middleton also um, just sort of nagging injuries. I do think Milwaukee has a pretty good squad. I like Doc Rivers as a coach. I think if there's something he can correct, it's that defense. Um, so, but it takes time to gel. Flipping systems in the middle of a season is something I would try to never do if I could avoid it, because that's a signal to the team that this season's a waste. And sort of we'll regroup next year. But I do think so. I think they've got a really good record. They have, Giannis. I mean, that speaks for itself.
And Damian Lillard. I mean, they made the huge
And
trade to
Lillard.
bring Damian in. Yeah.
They've got really good players, a really good coach who they just all haven't gelled well together yet. But I think there might be just enough time to start heading in the right direction. Can they win it all? I don't know. That's gonna be tough. There always has to be some trust. And I think he's just slowly building. And I think the timing of him coming in is really tragic, because I don't think it's reasonable to expect somebody to come in and take somebody to the promised land. But you need that off season,
Yeah, agreed.
But
So
I
number
think
four,
they'll be a dangerous playoff team.
number four, we come to the Warriors, who until a year ago had a dynasty going. They had won 3 out of 4. Of course, had Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green and a young Andrew Wiggins. And then last year, the Denver Nuggets came and stole the crown from them. And this year, they really didn't look like the same team. They spent most of the first half of the season under 500. Lots of injuries. Steph's been in and out of the lineup. Clay's been in and out of the lineup. Clay, of course, coming off the big surgery in the offseason. Draymond Green had to serve a 10-game suspension. All of a sudden, as soon as the All-Star break happened, really the last 10 games or so, Golden State's really coming into their own and starting to make a little push. So do you think the Warriors can make a little run here?
Well, I love what Kerr does with them. I think he's able to hit an accelerator that most coaches can't find after the playoffs, after the All-Star break, heading toward the playoffs. However, I think if you look at their point differential, they give up about 1.4 points is their differential. So they give up 1 point less than they score on average, which is very little room for error. Their defense doesn't stop anybody. So they have to score their normal amount to squeak out some wins. So I don't like that very much. I want to see a big differential. And I think that it's hurt them having 10-game suspensions from one of their best defenders. I don't think some of their players, a lot of them are more offensive minded. And I think that they might not have it this year.
You can see they're sitting right now at the Mendoza line. They call it the Mendoza line because this is the play-in tournament, these 4 teams. They're literally right above the Mendoza line, and this is not a place they're accustomed to. They're used to being up in the top 1 or 2 seeds in the West. They're battling with the Lakers for the 9th and 10th seed, which you really didn't think you'd see. You have LeBron and Steph Curry, 2 of the greatest to ever play, trying to squeak into the playoffs. I will say 2 years ago, the Lakers made it all the way to the NBA Finals, and they were the number 10 seed in the West. They barely squeaked into the play-in tournament. And then, of course, LeBron and the rest of his squad found a way to get all the way to the big series. So anyway, it will really be interesting to see if Golden State and even the Lakers can do anything this year.
It's not impossible, but I would say that it's less likely than normal.
Agreed. Although they are both 7-3 in the last 10. So let's talk about those Lakers. Same thing. They had their in-season tournament victory, which was the first time that they had actually held an in-season tournament in the NBA as an experiment. I think it was really popular. Actually, the ratings went up quite a bit during that little in-season tournament. They won that tournament, and then almost immediately after it went on a pretty big losing streak. They went 4-13 at one stretch.
Mm-hmm.
And put themselves in a really bad position. Now they're with the Golden State Warriors trying to barely squeak into the playoffs. Of course, one of the reasons is because they have to constantly do load management with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, both of whom are in their 30s and can't
They're
play.
getting a little old.
Yeah.
Cam Reddish has been a little bit hurt with an ankle, and then those, they're kind of old and breaking down, and they have to load manage all the time.
Right.
I don't know.
A lot of games, Austin Reeves, who was, by the way, an undrafted free agent 2 years ago, is their best player on the floor some nights where James and Davis are not playing. You have Austin Reeves as their star player. So you can see why they're sitting in 9th and 10th because it's just not the same Lakers team that won the finals 3 years ago. You think they can make a run, though?
Well, I do, but it's kind of unlikely. I think they're just trying to hang on to get into the playoffs, and then they're going to stop the load management and just throw everything they got at it. I don't think they're quite good enough to make a full run all the way, no. But I do think they could make a little splash in the playoffs for a game or two. I mean, a series or two.
Another big debate that's been going on in Lakerland is whether Bronny James is going to get to play with his dad. That's been LeBron's dream for the last 5 years, is that his son would come up through the ranks and eventually get drafted by the Lakers, and they get to play at least one season together. Bronny James, however, of course, had the heart issue. It was a very scary situation. And he now returned to USC and is not exactly tearing up college basketball. He's been actually very disappointed. And a lot of people don't think he's really even NBA caliber. I still feel like he'll get a chance because the NBA needs him to get a chance. And he'll probably be chosen in the second round or something. But will be really interesting. There's rumors that he is going to try to enter the NBA draft after the college season. So what are your thoughts about Bronny? Can he join his dad for at least one season?
I'm hearing scouts talk about how his skills don't translate. They're not high enough level to be NBA caliber. But you're right. There are some political forces at play here in terms of trying to get him into the league so that they can have the eyeballs. That would be very entertaining television. And so the NBA can certainly make this happen. I imagine fairly easily. Somebody's going to want that level of interest in their team. So, yeah, I mean, I think if his last name wasn't James, I don't think he'd be in the NBA.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So that tells you what you need to know is he might make it.
Yeah, someone will give him a cup of coffee because the NBA needs him, kind of thing. For the next generation. He'll sell a lot of jerseys his 1 or 2 years in the league and then fade out. Yeah.
And every game would sell out because everyone wants to watch
that's my thought, is that they need him to be in the league, so they'll figure out a way to do it. Number 6, we've got, will the Mavs frontline additions help them avoid the play-in tournament? Mavs made some big moves at the trade deadline. They went and got Daniel Gafford and P.J. Washington from my Charlotte Hornets. We were, of course, very sad in Charlotte because we all loved P.J., but these are 2 great additions for the Mavs right at a time where they were kind of sagging, very similar to Golden State and L.A. They really have a lot of talent on that team, and we're feeling like they were underperforming. So are these additions kind of late season going to be able to help them make a run in the playoffs?
I think so. I think these are really good role players to put around Luka. And even though he's got little nagging injuries a little bit, he's He's leading the league in points, third in assists, um, and second in 3-pointers. So I mean, he is a machine, and all you need to do is put some nice role players around him to give him help. And I think they've probably done that. And you might, and then now you've got a dangerous team in the playoffs.
No doubt. I really wonder if that team's going to have any effect from the sale of the team by Mark Cuban. They're in the process of selling the franchise right now. Of course, he made a humongous profit on it, but he's having to sell because there was a big sexual harassment scandal within the Mavericks organization that got very similar to Daniel Snyder in Washington in the NFL. And he's now having to sell his franchise. So I wonder if that's going to have any effect on this year's team, or if they just don't care and they just keep pushing forward.
I don't know. I think maybe that's a little bit behind them. The shock of that's definitely gone, I think. But anytime you have a big change and you have different voices at the top, it can be a little disconcerting. Everyone's wondering, am I going to have a job next year?
Right.
So
Luka's playing at an MVP level. So anytime you've got an MVP level player in your team, you've got a chance. So
yes.
Number 7, what team will be on the spot in March and April? So last season was about the Sacramento Kings. They were kind of the big Cinderella story that lit up the NBA. What team is that going to be this year? Who's going to be that kind of Cinderella story that gets further than we expected? 2 years ago, it was the Atlanta Hawks when they went all the way to the semifinals in the East. Who do you think could potentially be that?
The Knicks are better than they've been the last few years.
Yep. You can see actually New York is sitting well within the top 5.
Yeah.
So that's been a big story. So yeah, I'd say the Knicks definitely would be a possibility. Orlando's been surprisingly good, sitting in 4.
Orlando, yep. That was another one I was going to mention. And something about Minnesota. I just think they're dangerous. They don't really have that much in the way of stars, but they just have, really good defense, and they can score pretty well. And I think it would be really easy to overlook them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think those teams probably are the most likely to be the Cinderella story this year. Number 8 is, what team can salvage a poor start? So that's really, the article claims, would be a flip between the Atlanta Hawks and the Chicago Bulls. Both of them we expected a lot from this year, with Trae Young on the Hawks and Zach LaVine and the Bulls. But both of them got off to not just losing records, but really poor records, to the point where they're trying to salvage their seasons. You can see currently Atlanta sitting in 10th and Chicago sitting in 9th. So they're kind of the East version of the Lakers and Golden State Warriors. So what are your thoughts about which of these teams can find a way to salvage this thing? And of course, Trae Young, I think you said, was out until early April right now with an injury.
They're reassessing in April, so he may not even be coming back then. I'd say Chicago, they're fighting their way back into contention. They have had a decent amount of injuries, and they have Zach LaVine and Lonzo Ball are out till October 1.
Right, absolutely.
I don't know. But yeah, they've had surgeries, and I think they've just battled through that, and now they're battle tested. I think they can, but I don't know about going much further than maybe surprising the first round team.
Yeah, I would agree with that. All right, next one is, will anyone catch the Celtics in the East?
No, but I don't know that necessarily that means they win the whole thing. But no, I think they're going to be the number 1 seed.
I mean, you thought it'd be the Bucks, but I mean, Cleveland's been pushing up in there. They've been kind of a surprising story this year.
Yep. The
These
Knicks
teams they're kind of nipping at the heels of the Celtics. But when I saw the Celtics the other day play the Golden State Warriors, and beat them by 51 points.
Yeah.
I just thought to myself, not only will this be the number one team in the East, but in my opinion, they're going to end up winning the title this year. I think finally Jason Tatum's going to break through. He's already kind of semi-superstar as it is, and I think he's going to be all-world superstar after this year's finals. That's my
They just
prediction.
have a really good team. I mean, their differential is the most extreme of any team between the points they score and then the points they allow. And they are just a solid team. They don't have much in the way of players and leading in stats, which tells you that their whole team's involved. You know, they don't rely on a guy or two guys or a big three. They are very good all the way around. Whether Tatum's in there or not, you know, they can beat you a bunch of ways. They have a lot of good like B-level stars and role players, and they throw them all at you.
It's interesting you say that because every star in the NBA needs a 2 and a 3 and a 4 to really make a run, and he's got that in Jaylen Brown. There's no question Jaylen Brown's the second best player. He's an incredible player. And then Al Horford is a really nimble center who can score. He can create his own shot, which is really rare for a center. And then you have Robert Williams and a couple of other role players that are just really, really good. I do selfishly, as a UVA fan, wish that Malcolm Brogdon was still on the Celtics, because I think that this would probably be the best chance in his career to get a title. But I'm currently picking the Celtics to win it this year.
Unfortunately, he's a little banged up right now, but he'll be back soon. Elbow, Malcolm Brogdon for Portland.
Right.
But
so last question is, who will finish with the worst record in the NBA? We have San Antonio Spurs. We have the Charlotte Hornets. Let's take a look at the standings.
I think Washington.
In the East, you have Washington at 9-52 and Detroit at 9-52. And in the West, you've got San Antonio and Portland. It looks to me like the East teams are not going to be able to catch up with the West teams at the bottom. So
right.
I have to think it's going to be one of these two teams, Detroit or Washington.
I think Washington is going to get the worst record in basketball.
Can you imagine having a 148 winning percentage?
No.
And they're sitting at 0-10 in the last 10 games.
Those players have to be nervous because there's no way they feel like they have job security.
That's right. My Charlotte Hornets were the worst team in the league the first half of the year, and then they made a bunch of trades at the trade deadline that have really helped them, with Grant Williams and a couple of other guys coming in. They've got some youth, and they've actually, had a decent last 2 weeks. So it's been interesting to see them starting to turn it around.
Mm-hmm. They still have a long way to go. I mean,
they really do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, now it's time for your pick of who's going to win the East.
I think Boston wins the East.
Me too. I don't think Milwaukee can run with them. After I've seen Boston play twice in the last week, I just think they've got too much this year for the East. The West is very complex. There's a lot of good teams in the West, and I've been hemming and hawing about this, but I'm going to ask you to make your prediction first. Who's going to meet the Celtics in the final?
I don't know if I can pick one, but I'm going to say I'm going to pick two. It's going to be between the Clippers and Minnesota.
Okay. Why the Clippers?
I think they're hot. I think they're getting some people back. They are they're going to get Russell Westbrook back in April. I just think that they're gelling as a team at the right time, which makes them really dangerous because they have a pretty good record and they haven't been playing their best basketball, and they're starting to play their best now. So nobody wants to play them.
Agreed. One of the concerns I've got about the Clippers is what I always am concerned about with them, and that is I don't really trust Paul George and Kawhi Leonard in the playoffs right now. The last couple of years, especially Kawhi Leonard, especially Paul George has been a disappointment in a lot of his playoff runs. They also have Harden, who, as you know, has flamed out traditionally in almost every playoff run he's made.
True.
So they have a really solid
But-
team, and they've been hot lately, and they have the talent to do it. I just don't trust any of those guys in the playoffs. I think Kawhi's the only one who's really won anything in the playoffs.
Kawhi has a good track record in the playoffs and winning it all. So
Mhm.
I think he can get those guys in the right space mentally. And I don't think they have any pressure on them. So you don't want to play a hot, talented team that has no pressure on them.
Mhm.
I think they like that they're not in first. You
I'm gonna
know,
pick I'm gonna pick Denver again. I think they're gonna make it back to the finals. They won it last year. I think this year
Mhm.
they're gonna lose to the Celtics in 6. So that's my prediction. Celtics, Denver, and I think the Celtics take it. I would like to hear, though, who is a dark horse team you think could come up and surprise people? Let's start with the West.
um, I'd say Dallas.
Dallas, okay.
They're sitting at 8, you know, but I don't know anybody that would really want to play that team, with the additions they made and Luca, and they're they've got a lot of talent.
For me, it's Phoenix. You've got Durant and Booker there. They've always just been kind of hovering in the middle of the pack all year, but
Mhm.
they've got the kind of explosive scoring to pick off a series that they didn't expect. So, for me, I guess the dark horse team in the West would be Phoenix.
Mhm.
What about in the East?
The Knicks, um, and maybe Miami if they get a little healthier.
I think it's Miami for me. The last couple of
Yeah.
years, Miami typically limps into the playoffs,
Yeah.
and I don't know what it is about them, but when they get into the playoffs, they make deep runs. They've gone to the finals a couple times. They've gone to the Eastern Finals a couple of times. They have kind of that killer instinct in the playoffs. So,
Yeah.
ironically, both my dark horses are sitting in 6th in both conferences, Miami and
Mhm.
Phoenix.
I
That'll be
haven't seen the
interesting.
Knicks this good in a while. Um, but Miami's always dangerous, and they're in a position to do something about it. They're sitting in a good spot, and they've been kind of injured. So, Kevin Love, Hero, and Richardson are really have been banged up. They're coming back soon. I just think they could be turning a corner and make a dangerous run in the playoffs. I don't know about
No
win the whole thing or anything, but
no doubt about it. All right, well, let's look at the betting odds. Looking at Vegas and the way they look at things, this is the current odds to win the NBA championship. They've got the Boston Celtics sitting in first with the highest probability at 38%. They have Denver Nuggets sitting in second. So if you were to take a bet up to the window in Vegas right now, this is what you
Mhm.
would these are the teams you would be betting on and the odds you'd be getting. They've got Milwaukee sitting in third
Mhm.
with Giannis. They have the 76ers in fourth. Um, I bet these odds are going to be changing here pretty substantially in the next week or two because with
Yeah.
Embiid out now, I have to think that 76ers will drop. They surprisingly have OKC at fifth.
Yeah.
So, and this is the
Well,
total table
they're in
here.
second in the West, so they're
Yeah.
they're pretty solid.
I just thought it was interesting they were ranked above the Timberwolves, who are actually above them in the standings. And then it rounds out with Clippers, Suns, Cavaliers, all those teams having a small percentage. But you can see most of the money is on the Celtics, Nuggets, and Bucks. Those are the teams that
Mhm.
if this was betting today, that's who they'd be betting on. So that was a good recap of kind of where we stand at this time. Any other thoughts as we wrap up this post All-Star break review? And just to let all of you know, we will be doing some more NBA episodes when we get into the playoffs, and there's some more exciting things happening. Anything?
Um, Not really. It's interesting. Some of the some of the worst teams have somebody who's really good in one of the stat categories. I found that to be very interesting, that clearly this person's, maybe rebounding really, really well, but just not getting the help around them. So, but for me, the most interesting was the point differential. And if you watch that continue throughout the season, I'll bet you'll see the top teams are the ones with the biggest differential, of course.
Yeah, and in the end, it's also about who's a mash unit and who's healthy. You mentioned Miami getting healthier. All the teams feel that way. Every single one of them has major injuries this time of the season. And the reason load management is so big in the NBA today is because the playoffs are so long now. They in effect go about 7 weeks, and you end up playing over 30 more games if you go to the finals. So
To me, I red flagged some teams that have real injury problems, and it's not surprising that I think their fortunes are slipping. Portland, Philly, Memphis, and Chicago. And I think if those teams could get healthier somehow, they would definitely have better odds, and they would increase their chance of doing some damage if they can get in the playoffs. But some of them are sliding because of injuries, and it's going to take out their chance to really make any noise. They may not even, some of them might not even make the tournament because of it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Well, we'll see what happens here. It's going to be a really exciting run, and I want to thank all of you guys for joining us today for this episode, and we really look forward to a future episode when you come join us on the Sports Guys. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks. Take care.
Have a great one.